Good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning in to NTV Uganda, turning on your world. The conversation that we're going to be having today is definitely one you need to have information turned on so that you can act proactively, or in whatever capacity you are in, you can actually do your part rightly. I am Priscilla Regina Nalwoga, and this morning on NTV Uganda, we're bringing you a conversation around human-wildlife conflicts. Now, these are conflicts that are becoming more frequent, serious, and widespread because of human population growth. The other reason could be agriculture expansion and the infrastructure development that is happening left, right, and center. And of course, climate change and other drivers of habitat loss. For example, we have done stories here on NTV regarding wildlife that has been crossing into communities, either eating their crops, their animals, or even killing people at the extreme side of things. And so we have been talking about conservation of some of these gazetted spaces, but then what happens when the human and wildlife come into conflict? What are the solutions around that? Well, you do look at the human-wildlife conflicts occurring whenever there is wildlife and human population overlapping, and other factors that force wildlife as well as people getting into closer contact, making conflict more possible. Now, we got to have a talk show around this. Why? Because we want to discover the critical role that is being played by the Uganda Wildlife Authority in managing this delicate balance as we unpack the realities of human-wildlife conflict in Uganda's unique geographical as well as cultural context. Now, NTV Uganda is hosting this thought-provoking discussion, and I do have experts that are managing the situation for us in Uganda. Joining us for this conversation, we do have Dr. James Musinguzi, Director Community Conservation and ex-C2 Wildlife Services, and this is with his new position at the Uganda Wildlife Authority. We also do have Mr. Bashir Hanji, Manager Communications and Public Relations, also with the Uganda Wildlife Authority, and they're going to help us turn the pages on this conversation, especially given the fact that it's a festive season. People have to do local tourism. However, what's the protection of it all? Now, follow this conversation with the hashtag telling the SEDEP story, understanding human-wildlife conflict. I am Priscilla Regina Nalwoga. Welcome to this dialogue. Allow me to have my guests give their salutations to our audience, and then we'll get right into it, starting with Doctor.
Thank you very much, our great hosts. I greet you all our viewers this morning, and we are glad to be here to interact with you more about this great subject. Thank you.
Mr. Hanji?
Yeah, thank you very much for hosting us this morning. I greet all the viewers of NTV this morning. Looking forward to the pleasure of having a fruitful discussion with you. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Musinguzi, I'm going to start with you. Would like to have a contextual background in where this conversation actually enlights from regarding the Uganda Wildlife Authority. Where does it come from?
Thank you very much. The Uganda Wildlife Authority is a government body that actually is mandated by the government of Uganda to be able to carry out the conservation and management of wildlife in Uganda, as well as the protected areas, in relationship with the communities around these protected areas, but also sustainably manage and economically manage these resources for the benefit of Ugandans and the wider community. In other words, the Uganda Wildlife Authority is a body, by a government body, that is actually following the government planning frameworks. For example, we follow the 2040 vision. Whatever we do, we try to score in the national vision of 2040. We also follow the NDP3, which we are completing, and now entering NDP4. And as government has clearly articulated the planning, at the moment our GDP is about $50 billion US. And by 2040, government would like to grow tenfold to $500 billion US. And this growth is going to be contributed by the ATMs, that is agro-industry, tourism, manufacturing, minerals, including oil and gas, as well as science, technology, and innovation. So as tourism, we are going to play a very critical role, because the Uganda Wildlife Authority falls under the Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, and as tourism we are required to contribute $50 billion to this tenfold growth. Therefore, as Uganda Wildlife Authority, we have a very big role to play in this transformation of our country. Now, the Uganda Wildlife Authority gets the mandate to do this work from Section 6 of the Uganda Wildlife Act, where the mandate to manage 10 national parks, 12 wildlife areas, 12 wildlife reserves, as well as 5 community areas, is derived from the Uganda Wildlife Act 2019, recently amended to 2020 in 2024. Therefore, we take care of these resources as mandated by law and fitting into the government frameworks right from the Constitution. Section 2372A mandates government and the state to protect the resources, wetlands, forests, rivers, wildlife, and so the government bestows that responsibility on the Uganda Wildlife Authority. So we are here to elaborate about the efforts that we have taken to address this challenge of human-wildlife conflict in the country. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Musinguzi. Turning to Mr. Hanji,
yes.
there, in this regard, he has talked about 12 wildlife reserve centers that we do have, the 10 national parks, and he has triggered me to wonder if we do have a report that actually accounts for all the wildlife that we do have in Uganda.
Yeah, annually we produce the status of the state of wildlife resources in the country, and this is a public document. It's accessible on our website, but also upon request. You can always make this report available, and we publish it for the public. So we have this information about all the wildlife that we have in the country.
All right. And I would assume that there's been some steady growth and stability for the wildlife in Uganda, which has meant that there's some interventions that you've had to apply to realize this growth. What are some of those?
The interventions we've made, one, we have strengthened the aspect of law enforcement, very critical, because one of the biggest challenges that we face is poaching. The biggest cause of the decimation of wildlife in the country is poaching. And once poaching is maintained, and once we are able to address issues of human-wildlife conflict, there is no reason why animal numbers shouldn't thrive. Because once you are able to make sure that the wrong elements don't go to the parks, kill our animals, but also ensure that the habitat of the wildlife, the quality of the habitat is maintained so that the animals have where to thrive, they have where they can trek, the protected area is not encroached on, and then you make sure that you handle issues of human-wildlife conflict, because with human-wildlife conflict, once animals go out of these parks, sometimes they are killed by people. And once an animal dies, of course, that's a minus on the numbers. So once we address this, definitely you will see the animal population going up. And that's the reason why we are talking about HWC today.
All right.
One of the reasons
before we get into that, most recently we had a case of an elephant that had to die in the National Park Makshans National Falls National Park. And that conflict there, of course, was disastrous both to the wildlife. A park has lost a member. You do have on the side of humanity there, there's some damage that has been caused, the overspeeding, management of it. And it really begs the question, what is human and wildlife conflict, and when does it happen? How does it happen?
Yeah, human-wildlife conflict happens when the relationship between the two results into negative consequences for either party. The case you saw is a typical one. Someone is overspeeding. They know this is a protected area. They are supposed to observe a speed limit of 40 kilometers per hour. But of course, for reasons known to them, they choose to overspeed. It is night time. They are aware they are driving inside the protected areas. They are aware there are animals crossing, animals moving. Because look, these animals are in their territory. You get me? It's like when you are in your home, I mean. So they are moving freely. They don't know someone is going to come and then knock them. And then suddenly this person, because of this recklessness, knocks the vehicle, rather knocks the elephant dies. But also the investor, the person who bought this vehicle, also suffer losses. We've seen cases where even some of these drivers die, or when they have passengers and people get injured. So that is a typical case of human-wildlife conflict. But also, there are other cases. For example, competition for resources. Talk about land. Dr. Musinguzi was talking about the population of the country. In the 60s, where we had around 50,000, now we are talking about 45 million people in Uganda. And the land mass has remained the same. It has not changed. Now, as the population increases, people are exerting pressure on protected areas. One, for agriculture, they want to cultivate, industrialization, settlement. Now, all these exert pressure on protected areas. People are forced to encroach on protected areas for survival because they need land. Land is not enough outside there. But also because UWA and government, I mean, has done a great job in terms of protecting the animals. The animal population has gone up across the board. Okay? Now, as the animal population increases, the human population is also increasing. What's going to happen? The protected areas are the same. The boundaries have not expanded, but also the land outside protected areas remain the same. So there's competition for this. But also there's another aspect of climate change. Let's not run off from this. The cynics look at climate change differently, but it's a real thing. You find that maybe there's drought in the parks, the water is not there, water bodies have dried up, and now animals are also going out to communities in search for either food or water, and in so doing there's a conflict. And then there's an aspect of human safety. So when animals are out, people, very few people by the way will see, for example, a leopard in a community and they say, oh, sorry, this leopard is here, let us call UWA to come. They want to mobilize themselves and kill it, even when it has done nothing. This is
because it presents a threat to them.
Absolutely.
As a community.
They are threatened. Right. So, and then we have such cases which also make the situation even worse. So that is the context within which we look at human-wildlife conflict, but also the cultural practices. They make us look at human and wildlife different. There are people, one time I was interacting with some people, I won't mention the area, but they told me that for us culturally, if you don't eat hippo meat, you can even fall sick. Someone assures you that they must speak, or they must eat hippo meat for them to feel comfortable. So, and it tells you it's their culture. So such a person looks at wildlife differently. Why you look at it in terms of protecting it, this person is seeing a delicacy. You get me? Whether snakes or what, you know. By the way, there are no animals that people don't eat. Only that what you don't eat, some other person eats it.
Yes.
You get me? So they look at what you look at in terms of preservation, in terms of sustaining it so that it can attract tourists. Someone is seeing a delicacy, they don't understand why you are keeping it in the parks. They should actually put it in a saucepan. So this is all these, they form up to make this whole thing called human-wildlife conflict.
Okay, all right. So in the context of Uganda, how important is it that we actually focus on it in the sense of human and wildlife? It's no longer interaction, it's conflict now.
Yeah, and incidentally we are using the word conflict that you should have been using interaction. And I think that's the point where myself and Dr. Mchunguzi regret. Ideally we'll be talking about interactions. But clearly once the interactions yield negative results, we have a challenge. One of the challenges we've had is that in the context of Uganda, like I said, the land is a big thing. And then we have people who are jobless. People want jobs. And you know, once people don't have jobs, they have no source of income, they become vulnerable. And once they become vulnerable, they can be used by other people to kill animals for obvious reasons. Some people want animals, they want body parts. Others, the other time when we lost lions in Queen, the person we arrested told us that, you see, there is a witch doctor who told us that the fat of the elephant is sold, I mean, it's selling in, men likes a lot. You know, they burn it, they make oil out of it, and they told us that it's very good, a good aphrodisiac. Now, when you have such practices, you know you are going to have a lot of human-wildlife conflict. Even if animals now are not outside the park, okay, people are going to come to hunt them.
To encroach.
Okay? And the process of hunting them, you know what's going to happen. The relationship can be bad. We have an aspect of tree cutting in the country. People are cutting tree all over. If you go to Bunyoro sub-region, I'm sure you've heard of so many cases of chimpanzee attacks. And it's unfortunate, they attack women, they attack children, and people die, and we regret all that. But you see, once you destroy the habitat of the wildlife, you are exposing to wildlife attacks. There's no doubt about it. So you cannot live in harmony with the chimps. And what is the solution? Live and let live. Okay. Stay where you are. Let the wildlife stay where it is. Okay. But if you want to go there, you are definitely going to expose yourself. And this is the biggest challenge we have. Okay. When people have some small pieces of land, they want to dig up to the boundaries of the park. And ideally, we should be having a buffer zone. Okay. So that even if animals go out, they did not go to destroy post crops. But once an animal steps out of the park, 3-4 steps is in someone's garden.
Okay.
And this is someone's land. You cannot force them what they should do. So the Ugandan situation is a little bit tricky due to, one, economic factors and cultural factors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Msinguzi, in that regard, what could be the primary causes of all this, in light of the fact that population growth is only going to increase, it's not going to stay stagnant. You do have the land pressure also increasing. Climate change is here to stay as long as we are still not mitigating the other factors that cause climate change, but also habitat encroachment. As long as all these are still not yet addressed, we're definitely going to be having the human-wildlife conflict. So what is leading to this through those avenues?
Thank you very much. Suffice to say, in 1959, the population was 6.5 million. We were 6.5 million Ugandans. As we talk now, we are over 40 million, according to the recent census. And that poses a serious challenge. So, with the incidences of human-wildlife conflict, when the wildlife causes conflict or causes harm, people lose lives, it exacerbates poverty levels, it destroys people's livelihoods, and therefore, as the Uganda Wildlife Authority, it's incumbent on us to work hard to make sure we mitigate the effects of climate change. For example, there are so many interventions that have been put in place in order to mitigate human-wildlife conflict, so that in the long run, we talk about human-wildlife interaction and coexistence. First of all, we are trying very hard, like our vision and mission state. Of course, we want to be the global leader in wildlife conservation management according to our vision, but our mission is clear. It emphasizes managing these resources in conformity with the community areas or the surrounding communities, and to economically manage and also make it beneficial to these Ugandans. So what we are trying to do, one, we are, for example, digging trenches where the animals don't cross from the park to the community areas. We are also placing beehives along the distance between the area between the community and the parks, because beehives, for example, don't see eye to eye with elephants. They would definitely not cross if they are beehives. We are growing Mauritius thorns that can deter animals. We are building stone walls, quite a number of interventions. We are building electric fences. Actually, what you should know is that no single intervention can work alone.
Yes.
So we are working hard to make sure that these interventions are implemented, in a mixed way. If, for example, we dig trenches, we can also put beehives. We can also go ahead and do the Mauritius thorns. In addition to community conservation education and awareness, we are also bringing in the element of empathy. We are trying to see, look, we've lost an individual as a result of, for example, an elephant attack. What if it were me? So as community conservation, we are going in to engage the communities more. First of all, to show them the benefits of the wildlife, but also to commiserate with them in terms of compassion, in terms of empathy, in case they lose a dear one, as we intervene. These are the interventions, because as you realize, interventions like, for example, an electric fence is quite costly. 1 kilometer alone will require 63 million shillings to do 1 kilometer of electric fence and maintain it. And if you consider the entire country, you need quite some money, over 170 billion shillings to be able to fence all the areas. So we are trying to intervene in all these other areas so that we are able to work with the communities. We have put in place scouts. For example, we've trained over 500 scouts. Some of them have been given motorcycles, they have been given mobile phones so that they can be swift to inform UWA so that we can intervene.
Okay.
But also we are following the seasons. When the season is about, when the plants are about to be harvested, that's the time when we expect. So we are trying to look at those seasons, then we work with the community to put in place early warning mechanisms. And also, we are trying to work with the districts and also the communities to see how we can persuade and ask the communities not to grow palatable crops next to the park. For example, instead of growing maize, let them grow, they can grow garlic, they can grow plants which are not
if
palatable.
the soils allow.
Yes,
so then the intervention would then require Ministry of Agriculture to come in and maybe work on the soil so that they can be habitable for the other crops that you're referring to.
Yes, and that takes you back to our vision. We work with other stakeholders, definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Hanji, in that regard, earlier on we looked at the animal population report that you were referring to. However, there's another data that we'd like you to give us hands-on in regards to these cases. For example, in the past 5 years, what have these cases looked like? In which regions are they highest? And the other thing that we want to know is that what is the nature of the common cases?
Thank you very much. Like we say, like human wildlife conflict is one of the challenges that conservationists are grappling with globally. And for the Ugandan case, look, on average a week, we record around 846 cases in a week.
In a week?
Yes.
And these are the reported ones or captured ones. So there's a potential of the
reported cases.
Ones.
Now, there are those ones probably that go unreported.
Yes.
And then we have around 3,300 cases a month. So in a year, we are talking of around 12,000 cases. And for the last 5 years, because the cases kept increasing, you know. Initially the cases were few, now they kept increasing, and let me tell you why. The cases have increased because, one, we have enhanced awareness. People are more aware. They know that instead of killing the animals, they should report.
All right.
Okay? So they know the importance. They know that when they report, we take action. But you see, because you see, when they report and no action is taken, they say, now, why are we wasting our time reporting after all? These UWA guys will just sit and relax and they won't do anything. So because they know that they will report and we take action, but also they know that when they report, there's a compensation that comes with it. So they report cases more than they used to do. So in the past 5 years, around 24, close to 24,500 cases, 1,000 cases that we've got, and out of these, we've been able to respond to around 80% of these cases. Some of these cases, of course, are being compensated for, but some, of course, were before the law came into effect. And you know, the law, it doesn't work retrospectively. So when the law came into effect, that's when we started compensating. But over and above all this, the cases are many, and sometimes, of course, as UWA, we cannot say that we are overwhelmed, but they can be overwhelming, okay? Which shows the magnitude of the problem. And what are the common cases? One, crop raiding. This is one of the common cases, especially involving elephants, okay? And then the other issue we have livestock predation, where animals like carnivores, stock of lions, going out of protected areas, killing people's goats, and then when they come and report these cases. But also, there are cases of human safety, where lives have been lost of people. I'm sure you've heard of people being killed by buffaloes, being killed by elephants, being killed by lions, you know, so crocodiles, a lot of, so many cases are there. And what most people don't know is that even our people die, our staff. We also lose staff in the process of managing these animals. Sometimes we lose staff. Sometimes colleagues get injured. Others lose their limbs, you know, because they are serving, they are doing conservation work. Okay, so those are the common cases, and of course the common animals. We have elephants, we have buffaloes, we have chimps. Now we have baboons, we have crocodiles, you know.
Yeah.
So these ones. Okay. And Dr. Msinguzi hesitated to say something about the crocodile exclusion enclosures that we are building along the water bodies to ensure that people are able to fetch water safely. Because with this enclosure, you can enter and fetch water, go use the water safely. Now the challenge we have with this, you build it here, you find someone fetching water outside the enclosure. Okay? You find someone washing clothes outside the enclosure, and the enclosure is not used. Now that is a big issue. And you know, that's the kind of a donation, because I mean, if you are in a water body where you know you have many crocodiles, and they have put in place a mechanism for you to fetch water safely, and you refuse, you choose to go to where there is no any protection, that's a donation. One time we had Professor Kamuntu on one of the islands, and he found a gentleman naked on a rock somewhere in the middle of the water. And then the professor asked, why do you want to be dinner for a crocodile? You know? So we still have such behavior issues. Okay. And they are a big thing. Yeah.
Allow me to interrogate further. There's the case whereby a wildlife animal will eat a domestic animal, for example, a cow in this case.
Yeah, that's the predation I was talking about. Okay. Yeah, the animals go out of the park, especially carnivores. Yeah. They eat either cows or goats or sheep, you know. So, and because of this, the communities choose to retaliate. Now, when they retaliate, that's when you hear us talking about retaliatory killings. Okay? It has killed my goat, I'll also go and poison them.
Yes.
The case we had in Queen Elizabeth National Park. Yeah. So this was purely an aspect of retaliatory killings. There are some people who say compensation is not enough. Me, I must do something. Thank God, we have seen a decline in such retaliatory killings, because compensation is not the answer.
Okay, you've mentioned compensation. Now I'm intrigued to understand how compensation is actually working, how the authority is using it to manage the human-wildlife conflict cases.
Yeah, you see, the Wildlife Cap 315, the Wildlife Act Cap 315 provides for compensation for losses, damages, and injuries occasioned to people by wildlife outside protected areas. Okay. Now, if you are in a park, we don't compensate you, okay? Yes. If you've cultivated inside the protected area and the animals destroy your crops, we don't compensate you because you have cultivated in their territory. Okay. But when so they go out,
I'm referred to as an encroacher in that case.
You're already an encroacher. Okay. You're supposed to be arrested, you know? So, but once animals go out of the protected areas and they cause damage, we're supposed to compensate. Okay? Now, this compensation has been into effect, I think, for some time now, taken like 2 years. Yes, since 2020 we're doing compensation, but Doctor, I think Doctor has the exact figures that we are using to compensate people so far.
The Wildlife Act Cap 315, like he has talked about, was amended in 2022 to provide for compensation. Compensation in case, you know, crop raiding, human life loss, and of course all these are mechanisms to try and bring in the community to work with us in a collaborative manner. So when the Wildlife Act was amended, compensation was provided for, and of course regulations in this case were put in place. The regulations help us to show us how should it be done, the procedure and the processes. And so we've been experimenting since 2022 in terms of compensation, and we've actually got some gray areas, and now we are embarking on a process to review the regulations. For example, the time has been long. The time we take between the challenge and the compensation has been long, and so we feel we can shorten that process through eliminating some of the activities from experience after applying the compensation. Now, like he has told you, over 24,000 cases have been received since for the last about 5 years, and out of about 2.5 billion shillings that has been put into claim, we have so far paid up to 1.1 billion shillings has been paid out to people. About 104 billion is pending payment, and this involves verification because it's a process. Verification, some have been approved for payment, but they have not, for example, produced their letters of administration, the national ID. We have found out that some people don't have phone numbers that correspond to the NERA database, so you cannot just pay. So there is goodwill on the part of UA in terms of compensation, and we feel this should be able to at least create some relief. Definitely for human life, how much can you pay for? You can't, but as a way of compassionate understanding, but also supporting in terms of compensation to support the bereaved family to be able to carry on with life. So compensation is going on following agreed verification guidelines and regulations, and also a committee was put in place, the Compensation Verification Committee. So we issue a form 1, which is filled, then it is verified, it comes to the committee, the committee verifies and takes hands over or forwards to the board for payment. So the compensation is working. There are some gray areas of a bit of a delay, but we are addressing those through the review of the regulations that we are embarking on soon.
All right, Mr. Handry, as we wrap up this element of compensation, what's your final say on it, and how do people actually get to utilize this tool as an intervention?
There's something we need to understand. One of the causes of the delays that the doctor was talking about, when people file complaints, some of them are dishonest. I can tell you an example. I know of a case where an animal, a cow, was killed by an animal. And then people took different pictures, different angles of a cow to claim that there were 8 cows.
Oh.
Yes. Now, and for us, we want to see the 8 cows. Now, when we went on the ground, we could only see one.
See the bodies of the 8 cows.
Yes, we could only see one.
Okay.
So the question was, where are the 7? And it became a big, you see, we took them, so we said, why did you leave this one here? Okay, that's 1. 2, people think that, you know, with the compensation, it's a little bit different from outright purchase, where you say, I want this, I'm selling my watch at this, or I'm selling my cassava at this much, and someone says, you start negotiating. With compensation, these are rates that are established. In the districts where we compensate, we use the officially approved compensation rates of that particular district. So the rates for example, for Chirhura will be different from the rates we use when we are in Noya. Because Noya has its own rates, Chirhura has its own rates. So there are those differences. And it is not something that you go and negotiate and you say, I want you to pay me this. Because these rates are developed by experts and approved by district councils, and we do not have a say over the rate, and also approved by the chief government valuer. So we do not have a say over the rates to use. We use those ones that are existing in a particular district.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Walk me through the procedure that I would have to deploy in order to then access the compensation.
For you, once animals have destroyed your crops, do not tamper with the scene. No. Report to us. We'll send our staff to come and make an assessment. And once an assessment is done, we also have colleagues in the district that we work with, valuation surveyors at the district. Okay? We also want, because they are the technical people in terms of valuation. I cannot come and start masquerading that I can value what is in 1 acre of maize. But those guys are valuation surveyors and they are government workers, so they know what they are doing. So once we have all this information, photographic evidence, and our team has compiled a file, now it comes to the Compensation Verification Committee. Now, there's only one Compensation Verification Committee in the whole country, and we are talking about 24,000 cases. So you see why the delays are there. And also having to verify, is it true? Sometimes there are disagreements. Someone say, me the way I see my maize, if I had harvested this maize, I was going to get this much. Okay? But the maize that has been destroyed is 1 month. Someone wants the amount of money they would have gotten when the maize is on the market. You get me? But they are not sure whether it wouldn't have dried up. You get me? So there are those discussions. So that conversation alone causes some delays. And then when it comes to the Compensation Verification Committee, sometimes the Compensation Verification Committee is not also convinced enough. Sometimes they want to send back the file. Are we sure about this? You know, and I can tell you, I've seen cases where people's valuation figures are a little low, and the Compensation Verification Committee has increased on them. And I also know cases where people's compensation money has been reduced by the CVC. So it is there, it is receiving, but also kind of a clearing house. And then after that, now the report has to go to the Board of Trustees. Once the Board of Trustees approves, now the Board of Trustees approval comes with approval for the ED now to effect payment. You get me? So now you can see why it takes quite some time. It is a process, but also let's be mindful of the fact that the resources used do not belong to any of us in UWA. These are public resources. We must ensure that all the processes are followed to the letter. We have no interest in short-circuiting the processes because we want people to get money very fast. But we give it our best to ensure that we minimize on delays as much as we possibly can.
All right. The good news is that the compensation is actually working. It's one bringing to light.
Very well.
The people are now committing to report, and that has shown you the actual cases on ground that you have to deal with regards to the human and wildlife conflict. You can follow the conversation on the hashtag telling the SEDEF story, and that is across all our social media platforms. Now, we have been talking about these as conflict, but now we need to look at it as interactions, as Ali had said, and resolutions at the end of the day that we must resolve, because this is a community-based kind of issue. The community of animals and the community of human beings, and they must coexist. It begs the question, Dr. Msinguzi, what are the existing solutions that are being applied to manage these cases in Uganda, and also which stakeholders are you involving in these interventions?
Thank you very much. The interventions are quite diverse, like I earlier on pointed out, because as you know, we're talking about, by the way, wildlife in protected areas that stray out. But about 60% of wildlife is actually outside the protected areas. They live in community lands. And therefore, one of the interventions we are trying to see is to work with the communities to see how to turn this wildlife into a resource. For example, we are promoting wildlife user rights. We are asking people to establish, for example, conservancies where they can actually earn money from this wildlife that is within the areas. Of course, working with the Uganda Wildlife Authority, they apply for wildlife user right permit, which is issued to them, and then they are able to set up a conservancy. You can set up a wildlife ranch, you can set up a zoo, So those are some of the wildlife user rights that we are promoting in order to promote sustainable wildlife utilization, creation of jobs. That is one of them. The other one, of course, the other interventions, like I told you, don't stand alone. We apply them jointly. But the most outstanding one now that we are, which is quite costly, is the electric fencing. The electric fencing, like I told you, you need about 63 million for 1 kilometer, installation and maintenance. And we have phased, because we have a presidential directive to actually fence off these areas for the next 5 years. So we have phased the fencing. We are using internally generated revenue by the Uganda Wildlife Authority, but it's not enough. And so we are writing projects to see how we get more funding from supporters and partners to be able to get rid of this problem. I'll give you an example. In Oyam, for the last 3.5 years, when we did the electric fence, there has never been any problem of actually animal death. Deaths caused by animals. And yet before, we used to lose 3 to 5 people per quarter. That's about over 10 people in a year, which is bad. So the electric fence is not a magic bullet, but is a very good intervention if applied with the other interventions. So Uganda Wildlife Authority is committed, and especially having been directed by His Excellency the President, to make sure we fence off these areas. But this cannot be done in one go. We have phased it over a 5-year period, every year. Even in this financial year, we are currently fencing in Noya. We are also fencing in the Queen Elizabeth National Park. We are working with the partners, which we appreciate, and we are going to continue writing projects. So the hope that we want to give our fellow Ugandans is that work is being done to make sure we come to a reduction of these cases, because they undermine government efforts. Now government is supporting the communities through the parish development model. If they are to establish their crops and they are destroyed by the animals, it's a problem. They undermine the government effort. So we are working very hard to make sure that we mitigate this challenge through the various efforts. Beekeeping. By the way, the beekeeping, in addition to deterring elephants, for example, straying from the park, it gives income to the people, to the communities. Growing of red chili, because red chili smell that is not palatable to the elephant, so they wouldn't stray. So we are trying to see how do we economically empower people's livelihoods as we mitigate these elephant and other animal challenges. All right.
In that regard, before I go to Mr. Henry, there's the private sector that has also really dug their claws into tourism, and they're working putting up conservation areas in which they bring in animals.
Yes.
And what has been your engagement with them in ensuring that they too get to have awareness,
Yes.
get to have some training in order to protect the human-wildlife interaction?
Yeah, we are actually, it's our mandate as Uganda Wildlife Authority to actually promote wildlife-based enterprises as part of the other clause in our mission, working with other stakeholders. Because when a wildlife enterprise is set up, we are creating jobs for our people. We are, improving people's incomes, socio-economic transformation. We are bringing people into the money economy that we want to see people as we transform our communities, because there must be metamorphosis from a peasantry community to an empowered community economically. So they must join the money economy as being articulated by government. Therefore, as Uganda Wildlife Authority, we put in place wildlife user rights, which stipulate different areas where a private sector can actually invest in wildlife. You can do trade in wildlife, you can do farming, you can do education, you can do a ranch, conservancies, and now we are starting to empower them by technically supporting these groups. For example, if you had set up a conservancy, if you had set up a wildlife ranch, what should the dimensions of the sizes be? Because we must be mindful of animal welfare. As a country that is following international standards, animal welfare must be put at the center. So as Uganda Wildlife Authority, we are providing technical support to the private sector. But also, we are going to cause more awareness, because not many people know that actually you can invest in wildlife. People have chunks of land and don't know that actually can set up a wildlife farm or ranch. So we are going to cause more awareness and say, look, you can actually turn wildlife into money, working with the Uganda Wildlife Authority and following the right standards and procedures.
All right. Mr. Hanji,
Yes.
Law and order is to human, and I believe that it should also be to wildlife. So talk to us about the side of law enforcement and protective measures.
In terms of law enforcement, actually, I think that's one of the biggest mandate, because, like I said, the wrong elements in most cases want to use illegal entry into the protected areas, and you have a few. Okay, let me put it this way: you have these people you call petty poachers, those community members who poach for food, and then you have those ones I call enterprise poachers, those who go for body parts. They want ivory, they want teeth, they want bones, they want skins. Now, if you allow these people to breathe, as in giving them a breather to do what they want, believe you me, they will throw parties in the parks. So that's where now the law enforcement arm comes in. We do patrolling, day and night patrolling. If you go in areas where like we have apes like in Windy, we follow those gorilla groups 24/7. We must know where a particular gorilla group is. All this is done in the name of law enforcement. We want to ensure that the animals are protected, they are not killed, but also want to ensure that there are no people who are entering protected areas illegally. They are regulated and known gazetted entry points for these national parks and wildlife reserves. So if you enter, we are able to tell that so and so is in a park. Now if we find you there and you cannot explain how you are there, the Wildlife Act Cap 315 has news for you. You are arrested and prosecuted in the courts of law, and upon conviction, the judicial officer can sentence you even to 5 years, just illegal entry. So you can see how dangerous it is to enter a protected area without authorization. Now, the law enforcement aspect does not work alone in isolation. It works with the software aspect of awareness. Dr. Msinguzi has been talking about community education and awareness. Okay, it works with intelligence. We have an intelligence arm that gathers intel. We have an investigative arm that investigates, and then we have a prosecution arm that prosecutes the cases in the courts of law. That's why, for example, I can tell you that last financial year, we prosecuted around 540 cases. Can I tell you we got around 390 convictions? That's That's a very good percent in terms of performance. But we want 100% conviction. And let me tell you this. It is not our intention. It's not what we want. For us, we want people to stay away from the animals. We don't want them to come to the parks illegally. They should come and use the designated entry points. We don't want them to kill the animals. We will be in harmony. We will be at peace. And that's what you see us doing. We are saying, can we live and let live? It does not help someone to go to kill a Daika, for example. You are arrested. I know of someone who was sent to 8 years in prison for killing a Daika in Rwenzori. Where are his children, his wife, family members, social network? He's completely cut off. By the time the man comes out of jail, believe you me, he will be a stranger just because of killing a Daika. So we don't want that to happen. We want people to stay where they are, support us in conservation work. We work together. And then we do enterprise development in communities. We do livelihood improvement in communities. We lift people from a low to a high indifference curve. We achieve socioeconomic transformation. And we get more tourism revenue coming because the animals are not dying. And once we get more tourism revenue, 20% that we share with the communities goes up. A community that was getting 100 million, they get like 200 or 300 million because the 20% has gone up, and we're all happy. This is what we are looking for.
Yeah, Mr. Hanji, that's on the positive side.
Yes.
But we also have to be realistic that there's been immense negative impact as far as this human wildlife conflict is concerned.
That's true, yes.
Talk to us about that. What are the realities of this impact?
The realities are, one, there is an economic impact. You know, if you have 5 acres of, let me say, cassava, and the animals destroy the whole of it, I want to assure you, even if we compensate you, it's not what you would have got if you harvested the cassava. So there is economic loss, and you know, once there is an economic loss somewhere in Noya, and there's an economic loss somewhere in Kasese, and somewhere in Karenga, it affects the national economy as well. Because that's how the economy works. It starts from the bottom, the economic activities that the citizens engage in. So there is a loss of income on the side of communities, but also there is a loss of trust between us and the communities. Sometimes even when you tell them, they say no, it's too much. The other day I heard of an LCC chairperson who declared that we should never step in his sub-county. He doesn't want to see our staff there. He is going to order to kill all the elephants that were in Waiyali. And understandably, so the man was annoyed. Okay? But like he said, 60% of the wildlife is outside protected areas, and we must protect it from there. The other issue is about loss of life. People have lost breadwinners. These are bitter realities of human-wildlife conflict. A family head dies, leaves a wife, children, no one take care of them. You know, when we are doing an electric fence in Rubirizi, women made a confession to the president when he was commissioning the fence. They said, Your Excellency, we were having a problem. There were social issues in families. Men would go out to guard the gardens.
At night.
At night.
Yeah.
So women would take a month without seeing their husbands.
Yes.
Because every night these men are guarding gardens so that animals do not...
taking personal initiatives.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay? Now, but the bigger issue is, among these ones who are going to guard gardens, someone from household A would know that someone from household B has gone to guard the gardens, and this one goes and helps him at home. You know, so we saw cases where people are saying, we are not very sure about our children, but at least the children belong to the community. You get me? And guess what? They were confessing to the president that after the installation of the fence, all of that is history. Because the men went back home, because the animals no longer disturb them. They can cultivate, rather they can cultivate crops until they harvest and go to the market and make money.
All right, so some interventions have restabilized the community.
Big time, especially the electric fence, which has been a game changer. But there are others that we didn't talk about. For example, working closely with community scouts. These are very important because these are community members and they are part of our early warning system. Because they are able to tell that the animals have got out of the park and then they are able to give us an alert system and we go and respond.
All this comes down to money.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The Uganda Wildlife Authority, what's the budget looking like to be able to support this work and the actualization of this work? But also, it begs the question as we wrap up, what are the futuristic directions that the authority is taking to mitigate this issue and have safe coexisting communities?
Well, we deliberately put aside 2% of our revenue to cater for compensation, for example. That one is a given. It has been passed by our board of trustees and is a practice we are making. So we have some money to do the compensation. But like you have said, it's quite overwhelming in terms of the demands. And so the Uganda Wildlife Authority has actually expanded the structure now. Some of us have come in to support the establishment, especially in strengthening the community conservation efforts. And we are here to bring a message of hope to our communities that we are going to strengthen all these interventions that we are talking about. We are going to give more information, more awareness. We are going to go and look out the black spots, for example, the hot spots for human wildlife conflicts. We have started the process of mapping all the hot spots. Where are the hot spots that interventions must quickly be done as we look at the bigger picture? So I know that people are hurting. There is a lot of pain, especially for loss of lives in terms of the families, but we are going to reach them. We are going to reach those hot spots. And in addition to the UA budget, we are of course going to write projects now to partners so that they can be able to support us, because this is a challenge that is going to stay. Like we've told you about the issue of population growth, the corridors, you know, like these elephants, they used to migrate up to Amuru, go up to Sudan. Now these corridors have been cut off. For example, there is a community, a place in Noya, Nyamukino, we have 19 elephants that have got stuck there. You know, much as we try to drive them into the park, they are stuck there because they know that as their corridor.
Their community.
So we are working very hard. In addition to our internally generated resources, we are going to work very hard to raise revenue. On Saturday, we actually hosted the Vice President of the World Bank at the Uganda Wildlife Conservation Education Center. I was there to represent the ED. And these are the discussions we're having. How can we write a specific project to address human wildlife conflict, especially via fencing these areas, but also putting in place the other interventions, especially now that we have a presidential directive to make sure we actualize. So we are not sleeping, we are working very hard at work to make sure we raise funds to solve this problem. So this is the message of hope that we are bringing to our fellow Ugandans out there. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of thinking, and we are going to reach them through our community engagement approach.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Musinguzi. Thank you so much, Mr. Hanji, for your continued efforts and creating awareness regarding the human-wildlife conflict, but also trying to communicate and implement some of the interventions and resolutions that do exist. As we wrap up this dialogue, efforts to assess and manage the complex human-wildlife conflict actually does require collaboration, as Dr. has finally concluded, across disciplines and sectors. For example, collaborations that could involve conservation practitioners, community leaders, government, researchers, private sector, and other stakeholders, and the need for expertise in ecology, expertise in social psychology, in economics, as well as peace building and environmental law. All these collectively can actually harness the human as well as wildlife, not conflict, but interaction. And so I commit to both of you that the next time we meet over this conversation, it should be interaction. I am Priscilla, Regina Naloga, and let us coexist. Let us live so that they can live.